All right, get in here. It is time. This is the day where we talk about the big stories of the week. And this week, that means talking about the new movie from Edgar Wright. That's The Running Man. Will it make Glenn Powell a household name? I don't know. There's also a new comedy, Canadian comedy, called Office Movers. It's been picking up a lot of audiences recently. I want to get into it. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. Teri Hart is here. Kaiya Shunyata is here. Rad Simonpillai is here. Hello, friends.
Hello.
How are you? It's nice to see everybody. This is what a delight. What a delightful way to start my day. Okay, we're going to start with The Running Man, and I just want to very quickly set the scene with this.
Welcome to The Running Man.
Survive the world's deadliest game show.
Walk away with $1 billion.
That's actually not true. No one has ever survived.
We know a way to beat it, but we have to work together.
The biggest underdog win in game show history.
Okay, there's going to be people listening to the show who are like, I know The Running Man. That's a movie from 1987. Guess what? Reboot. This is the reboot of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. It's based on a Stephen King novel. The premise is this. There's a televised game show, and then there's a bunch of contestants, and they're competing in this, and you're hoping not to get murdered. And if you win $1 billion. Sounds like familiar a little bit, because I think we've seen a few iterations of this. But I'll start with you, Rad. This reboot of The Running Man, Edgar Wright, we kind of know him as someone who enjoys cartoonish action, someone who enjoys sort of like over-the-top sort of action sequences, I think. Baby Driver comes to mind. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World comes to mind. How does his vision of The Running Man differ from that 1987 movie?
Well, I mean, I think first and foremost, he's hewing much closer to the novel Running Man in this version, right? Because when you think about that Schwarzenegger version, it had some huge departures. The hero character, Ben Richards, in that movie was a military man wrongfully. He was framed for massacring an unarmed civilian population. He's sent to prison. And then he's forced into the games. And the games themselves, they were like wrestling matches, because I think it was trying to tap into the mindless entertainment of that time. And to that end, they even cast like popular WWF wrestlers like Jesse Ventura and Professor Tanaka to go up against Schwarzenegger.
Incredible.
Very cheesy, lousy movie, but I mean, I think that casting was nifty. So the new one, I mean, you got Glenn Powell playing, like as in the novel, a character who is broke, who's been fired for standing up for his fellow citizens and colleagues and for basically human rights in some ways on the job, for union protections and things like that. He's broke, he's desperate, his daughter's sick, and he needs medication, so he willingly signs up for the games where he has to survive this surveillance state for 30 days where everyone's trying to kill him. So that is cueing much closer to the novel. Where I think this movie gets interesting is where it departs from the novel in the sense that it's not as dark. It's not as willing to tap into some of the fury of the novel, and that's where it kind of falls behind for me, because it's like it feels like Edgar Wright, he's not as committed to that stuff.
Yeah.
Right? He's not as committed to that stuff because he wants to do the Scott Pilgrim, Baby Driver, cartoonish mayhem and stuff. He wants to do something that's derivative of the stuff he's done before.
Yeah.
And that's where it didn't work for me.
I will not have Baby Driver slander at this table, not in this house. Kaiya, what do you think of the movie?
I thought the same. Like, it feels like it's not willing to commit to how bleak Stephen King can get. And I think we need something like that in regards to a film like this.
It's a bleak premise.
It is a bleak premise.
Yeah.
And in the book, like, he dies.
Whoa.
And it's, it's done and it's over. And in the film, it's like kind of a happy ending. And it feels like that is where the film like doesn't fully understand what it wants to be. Like, are we doing an action movie? Are we doing a critique on capitalism? Or are we doing like a bleak Stephen King adaptation? And none of those things are cohesive at all in the film, at least for me.
I got to tell you, I was really hoping for bleakness. So this is bleak news for me as someone who was hoping for this movie to sort of commit to the bleakness. But also, Teri, there's something to be said about the fact that, like, if you have Glenn Powell in a thing, maybe you're not going to go all the way bleak, because I feel like there's been a concerted effort to make Glenn Powell the uplifting hero of the moment. And I'm talking about Twisters. I'm talking about, the last Top Gun movie. There's something about trying to make Glenn Powell happen, right? Like this idea of like, hey, this will be the movie that finally makes him a Tom Cruise level A-lister. Are we there now? Have we arrived with The Running Man? Your hands are in the air.
Funny you bring up Tom Cruise, Elamin, because when I was watching this movie last night, I thought to myself that the whole movie is like a Temu Tom Cruise. It's like we're just not quite there, you know? It's like from the action to the story, like Glenn Powell even does the running with the pumping arms, but even that's not quite as good as Tom Cruise. And it reminded me, remember when Jimmy Kimmel came back after he was taken off the air for a while and Glenn Powell was his guest, and it was the most watched late night show in the history, and there's Glenn Powell as the guest. Like, what a spot, telling the most boring stories in the most boring way. And I just kind of feel like Glenn Powell is an empty vessel. And I really, really agree with everything that these guys are saying in terms of the movie just trying to be everything. It's trying to be an Eat the Rich movie. It's trying to, you know, Rad brings up the original talking about wrestling. This is bringing in like the vapidness of reality television where they have this ongoing TV show that's kind of Kardashian-esque. And so it's just trying to do too much and ends up doing not enough. And, you know, back to the Tom Cruise comparison and the want for Glenn Powell to be that, I just think that Tom Cruise figured out a way to have a persona on top of his acting abilities. And yeah, there's times that Tom Cruise has done too much, like jumping on the couch, but Glenn Powell just isn't there yet from any quadrant, whether it be, you know, acting to persona to just like, he seems like this manufactured idea of what a movie star should be. And I don't know if he's going to get there, but he's not there yet for me.
I think that there's something about Glenn Powell where every time I see him on a screen, I go, someone's insisting that I think this person's a star. I'm not necessarily unconvinced. I think like he did a pretty good job in Twisters, but also when I sort of think about this movie, I was hoping that this would be the one. I was hoping that this would be the one where I start to think about Glenn Powell differently. I'm hearing maybe not necessarily the one. Rad, I just want to close on this idea. Like The Running Man came out in 1987. Since then, the idea of blending dystopia and class wars and reality television, it not only has been done, it's been done quite successfully. May I introduce you to the Hunger Games series? May I introduce you to Squid Game? You know, we now have entries into this category. When you make a movie like this one, maybe I'll make it an open-ended question. Is The Running Man in conversation with the other entries into this category? Or is it not even trying to say, hey, I know what has existed before me and I want to add to it?
No, I mean, I absolutely think this movie lives in the shadow of those previous movies, but also lives in the shadow of our current reality. I mean, when you talk about a missed opportunity to meet the moment, right? I mean, it feels like just incredibly relevant when you think of The Running Man story as a movie about state-run media that manipulates the population through propaganda and turns society against each other and turns social activists into villains and heroes. And, you know, like when you think about that kind of divisiveness, I mean, stop me when that sounds familiar,
That's
right?
a rich terrain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yet, again, going back to how this movie cannot even feel emotionally invested in that struggle, like it's certainly gestures towards all that stuff in very superficial ways and brings up even social media, again, making the populations divisive. But again, that's not the stuff that you feel invested in because Edgar Wright's not into that. He's into the cheeky, self-referential, whiz-bang visuals. And so you never, and all of the aesthetics of struggle and resistance that is part of the narrative, like that's just kind of superficial props in this.
Kaiya, last word to you on this. The whiz-bang visuals is truly the most derogatory thing I've ever heard in my life. But did you see anything in this movie that gave you an indication that, like, you know what, Edgar Wright wants to at least acknowledge that he is existing in a world where someone has said things that are valuable about this world?
No.
Oof.
Yeah, and even like those whiz-bang visuals, like there's such a big chunk of the movie where that's not even apparent, and it doesn't feel like it's an Edgar Wright film. It feels like a movie that was made by 20 different people, and they're jamming all these things together. And then what comes of that is it does not know what it wants to say, and then it ultimately doesn't say anything.
You'd think all three of you telling me all this would talk me out of this movie, but not a chance. The Running Man is in theaters this weekend, and I am still going to go. Okay, I would like to switch gears, and I want to talk about a Canadian comedy that is getting on a lot of people's radars right now.
Bro, I'm just a man trying to stay afloat.
What's up, man? Trying to stay afloat, eh?
Yeah, bro.
You know what's funny about that? Aluminum floats.
You swing that to the right on a man, it'll sink a man to the bottom of the ship. You feel what I'm saying, Z-Money?
That is a scene from season 2 of The Office Movers. That show is created by brothers Jay and Trey Richards. It centers on their experiences. They're working for their dad's furniture moving company. And what you hear in that scene, right? You hear Jay's character in confrontation with a client. That client, played by Drake, the one and only. They got Drake back acting. That is where we have arrived in 2025. I'm delighted by this. So Drake's worked with the Richards brothers in the past because he's worked with them through their YouTube channel. But getting Drake on the show feels to me like, oh, that cements the amount of buzz that Office Movers is getting. That second season, by the way, dropped last week. And as it dropped, they were like, we're going to do a third season of this. It's already been renewed for a third. Kaiya, I want to start with you because you are a fan of the first season of Office Movers. How are you feeling about season 2?
I think season 2 is better. I think it's like there's more stakes, which makes it more interesting. And there's interesting ideas, unlike The Running Man, where we're talking about gentrification and capitalism, and it's done in a thoughtful way. Yeah. But the show still remains funny, and there's still so much heart to it. Yeah. And I think the Drake cameos are quite fantastic.
The Drake cameos have been all over my feed, and I gotta tell you, just based on the year that Drake has had, that in itself feels like a victory. Rad, what do you think makes the Office Movers a show that works?
I mean, look, and I've said this from season 1, this is a show that captures the Toronto that I know, okay? And because, I spent 20 years of my life driving delivery trucks around the greater Toronto area.
A thing that people don't know about you.
Yeah, exactly. I had a previous life doing all this. I had the same Bluetooth headset piece that Jay Richards is wearing with the boom mic and stuff, the one from the Motorola from 2008. However, I couldn't make it last more than 3 months. This guy somehow has it running for 15 years. And I think that's actually like a beautiful visual gag here because, he's wearing 2 separate Bluetooth headpieces as if to show off his big boss energy.
Yes.
And while he's, running this Office Movers company where they're moving all over a town, like it's really kind of capturing the aspiration, the social mobility he seeks by flaunting these 2 headpieces. Yeah. But he's stuck in place and stuck in time even, right, to hold on to this device from 2008. And that's what I think this show, as part of what it captures so beautifully, it's capturing these characters, these aspirational characters from the parts of Toronto that we don't often see. I mean, you think of a show like Nirvana, the band, the show which captured Queen West, and this show is doing what that show did for Queen West for the rest of the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, specifically like North York or like Vaughan and Brampton, where these guys are from, so the areas north of the city. And what it's capturing in all of that is these amazing characters who are like Black, West Indian, Latino, Indian, and the aspiration, the bravado, the fact that they come from humble means but have this limitless, almost obscene bravado, and they have multiple hustles. They should be focusing on the road, but they're just too busy with one hustle overlapping 100%. The other. And, it's just the absurd situations you find yourself in a job like that. The series captures all of that with just such wicked humor and also just affection.
Yeah. Teri, I'm really struck by the tone, but also the hyper-local nature of the show, right? Like when I think about the comedies that this country's produced in the last few years that have maybe connected outside of Canada, I think of Working Moms, I think of Schitt's Creek. There's something about those shows that is actually it's not particularly hyper-local at all. A show like Office Movers, also a show like Jess Rain's show, which is also on Crave, they're a very specific context that are very, like this is like as hyper-local as it gets. Do you think that's a limitation in terms of these shows connecting with a wider audience whatsoever?
No, I don't at all. I think it's its strength, actually. I think that, and shout out Brampton. I'm from Brampton. I went to Chincoosy High School.
That's why your hands were waving. You're like, mention Brampton, and then he did, and then you
Brampton.
finally
I
put
was like,
down
North
your hand.
York.
Yeah.
Brad, what are you talking North York?
They move around all over the place. Exactly.
Okay.
It is called Office Movers. But, this show, there's kind of a well-worn adage in entertainment and television, and it says the more specific, the more universal. Mm-hmm. And I think that, the reason Office Movers works is that these 2 brothers obviously know this world. There's like a semi-autobiographical aspect to Office Movers. Their father has a moving company. They worked at this movie company. These 2 guys have moved a desk or 2 in their life. Mm-hmm. And we see that in the show. And I will also point out that, it's very much a workplace comedy, but that workplace moves around like The Office, but doesn't have the mockumentary element to it. But also, like, what struck me watching it is there is something just intrinsically funny about moving furniture. Like, people have to contort their bodies in a certain way, and then one person is yelling at the other what the other can't see, and it's so obvious to the other person. You know, Friends captured it in that very memeable pivot with
Good
Ross,
scene.
Yeah, really good scene. And I think that these two brothers and Office Movers have really captured something that is so specific to a time, to a place, to an experience, that it makes it universal.
I have not to this day moved a couch without yelling the word pivot, even if no one had to pivot at all in picking up that couch. Kaiya, we mentioned the Drake thing earlier, and I'm interested in this because I do think it's been a difficult year for Drake in terms of just getting good press, but this unambiguously, people A, are loving that he's a part of Office Movers, and also B, they're sort of, I think they're thinking of him in a different light. They're maybe being reminded of Drake of yore, you know, an earlier time, an earlier sort of time where Drake was willing to be as funny as he is, because I genuinely think he's really funny. Do you think Office Movers becomes an opportunity for Drake to kind of like turn the corner on the Kendrick beef and go, can I do something else for a minute and like have some fun on television?
Yeah, I think so. And it works so well. And it's nice to watch because then you're reminded, like, oh, yeah, he did start as an actor. He's great in Degrassi.
Some of us are never forgotten. But
exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, and it's, I don't know, it feels like a way that his persona can kind of rehabilitate itself after that crash course, what happened with Kendrick.
Yeah.
And I think it's nice to see somebody that is such a mega star like put themselves forward for something that is still quite small, and something that is still so intrinsically Canadian and intrinsically like GTA.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see him support something like that and, you know, turn it out.
Yeah, I totally, completely agreed. That season, by the way, season 2 of The Office Movers is streaming right now on Crave. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. Kaiya Shunyata is here. Rad Simonpillai is here. And Teri Hart is here. And before we go, we got one more thing to talk about, and it's this.
You must be the lady I've been hearing so much about.
Yes, sir. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. King.
Well, tell me about yourself. Jesse here says that you fight in all pink.
I'm from West Virginia.
What's that got to do with pink?
Nothing, sir. I'm just telling you about myself.
So that is from the trailer for Christy. It stars Sydney Sweeney. She plays the boxer Christy Martin. It premiered at TIFF in September. There was some Oscar buzz for Sydney, including from some people around this table. But since it arrived in theaters last week, the story has shifted a little bit. Because last weekend, the movie made $1.3 million. It opened at like 2,000 screens. That makes it one of the worst openings for a wide release of all time. Rad, there has been a lingering, shall we say, cloud over Sydney Sweeney since that American Eagle ad, the jeans, you know, my jeans are blue. Some feel sort of Christie's poor box office performance is a result of that, or at least in conversation with that. That feels too neat to me. Where do you land on this?
Yeah, it is too neat because I think there's a lot of factors that went into why this movie failed the way it did. And first of all, why are you putting it in 2,000 theaters? Right?
That's a lot of screens, man.
It's a lot of screens for an independent movie like this. I mean, this is the kind of movie that you hope, you know, it premiered at the Toronto Film Festival. You hope it captures critical praise and Oscar buzz and everyone yelling that this is like Charlize Theron changing her look and giving you an Oscar-worthy performance in Monster. And first off, I mean, the movie didn't capture that buzz. You know, it's not a very good movie. And Sydney Sweeney in the movie is fine, but she doesn't give the kind of performance they have to run to a theater for. So it didn't have that aspect of it. Didn't have the word of mouth momentum that you would hope for a movie like that to first start off in a few small theaters in big cities and then build that word of mouth and spread. So I guess maybe that's why they decided to let's go wide right away before people realize that he's not going to have that Oscar buzz. Let's go wide in 2,000 theaters and bank on Sydney Sweeney's name because she's that girl at the top of all the conversation. She's a big star. We can't stop talking about her. She bats an eyelash and the internet breaks. So they were probably they were banking on that in putting it into wide release, but then clearly this showed you that she was never that girl in the sense that she can't command box office audiences. I mean, she's famous for Gene ads, and she's famous for Euphoria, which is a television show. So, you know, this is the first time we've tested whether she has that kind of draw. Clearly not. But also, you know, this is not the kind of stuff like a drama like this that Sydney Sweeney's fans know her for or are drawn to. And we saw another failure just like this recently with the Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson movie.
The Smashing Machine.
The Smashing Machine, which, by the way, much bigger budget. So that movie's failure to draw Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's fans in wide release was I think even a bigger. That was a bigger failure. But this one, because it's now on that top 10 list of worst openings.
I just want to highlight for a moment that that's an important thing to distinguish. Like, not every movie opens in wide release right away. That's why sometimes you see ads that say limited release only or limited theaters only. It's because it's growing buzz. It's growing sort of like the movies don't just need ads. They also need the ability for someone to go, hey, I really like that movie. You should go see it also. And then as word expands, so do the screenings. But just before this movie's release, Sydney Sweeney sat down for an interview with GQ's Catherine Stoffel and gave her a chance to respond to the criticisms over that American Eagle ad. I just want to play some of that exchange.
And the criticism of the content, which was basically that maybe specifically in this political climate, like white people shouldn't joke about genetic superiority. Like that was kind of like the criticism, broadly speaking. And since you are talking about this, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that specifically.
I think that when I have an issue that I want to speak about, people will hear.
We should talk about Cassie.
Kaiya, that response made me want to die. But what did you make of that response? The awkwardness was too much.
The whole interview is like a David Lynch movie. Like something about the way it's shot and the way they're speaking to each other. Yeah. It's so strange. And there is nothing going on her face.
Sydney Sweeney's stone face as you're watching.
Yeah, and it's like either she hasn't thought about it at all, or she doesn't care enough to think about it critically at all, and that is a big problem. And it doesn't make sense to me that her and her PR team think that silence is what they should be doing right now, when it's such a big point of contention for her fans and for people outside of like her like fandom, especially considering the politics of right now. You
got to say something.
Condemning white supremacy isn't hard.
That seems like a low lift to me. Yeah. But I will say this. Sydney Sweeney has talked openly about the fact that like she doesn't come from Hollywood money, and the idea of like an ad being criticized. She's someone who does not want to close doors on future ads, and if she's sort of seen in interviews being like, I shouldn't have done that ad. Suddenly, those calls stop coming. Suddenly there's nobody else sort of making a call being like, oh, you should also be in our ad. Having said that, you got to say something, I think. Teri, where have we landed in terms of this idea of the state of the Sydney Sweeney brand right now? Where are we at?
Well, I think it's really interesting that we're talking about Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney in the same show. Because
very differently.
The movie,
yes.
Yeah, but really the movie really differently. I don't think that differently, actually.
Okay.
The movie that launched both of them into kind of anything that resembles chatter was Anyone But You. Like, that was the movie.
That's a rom-com.
Yeah, and it launched conversations about where are rom-coms. Like, it launched conversations about an entire genre of movie that they seem to represent, and they seem to be the people that people wanted to see. But I'm going to say something that might sound a little bit ridiculous, and I think Rad was like nudging up to this, but I don't think Sydney Sweeney is that famous. I really don't. I think that Sydney Sweeney is talked about a lot amongst a certain group of people, but I don't think she's famous for being an actor. Euphoria is a very, very niche show. Yeah. And this is a movie, Christy is a movie about acting. And Rad brought up, Charlize Theron. There's also the Hilary Swank example of the transformation.
That's $1 million baby. Yes, 100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Boys Don't Cry as well for Hilary Swank. But I would say that the difference here is Charlize and Hilary had this like filmography behind them before they did this transition, and Sydney just doesn't. And I think her fans, so it's not like, is she transforming? It is, who is this person? I don't know who she is before that. And that's problematic. They, I don't think they marketed this movie in any way that felt fresh or new. It felt like, yeah, I've seen that before. I've seen the female boxer that was in a crappy relationship that then survives. I mean, Did it feel fresh? Did it feel new? It didn't for me.
And I think like maybe the other lesson that we're learning here is maybe enough boxing and wrestling movies for a little while. The people have maybe had enough, you know?
Or have better actors. Because The Rock is terrible in this machine.
I gotta leave it there. I appreciate you guys. You guys are wonderful. This has been great. Thanks again.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. That is Rad Simonpillai, Kaiya Shunyata, and Teri Hart. You guys are the best. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We'll be back on Monday. We would love to see you then.